Caroline Mercer had always believed that silence in a home meant peace. For years, the little house on Hawthorne Lane in Richmond had been a safe place for her and her daughter, Lily. The two of them had built a life that felt simple, steady and predictable. Yet as autumn crept across the neighborhood, bringing colder sunsets and longer shadows, Caroline began to sense that something in her home had shifted. Lily no longer rushed to the kitchen each afternoon the way she used to. She did not chatter about school or laugh at the dog from next door. Instead, she walked straight to her bedroom, shut the door gently but firmly, and remained there for hours. Caroline told herself it was typical behavior for a 16-year-old girl. Teenage moods. Stress from school. The world changing faster than Lily could grasp. But a mother always feels the difference between ordinary silence and troubled silence. One evening, Caroline climbed the stairs with a basket of laundry. Soft music drifted from Lily's room. The door was half open, just wide enough for a mother to glance inside. Lily sat at her desk with her back tense, her face lit by the glow of her laptop. She was scrolling quickly, closing windows, opening new ones, moving with an urgency Caroline had not seen before. When Lily sensed her mother's presence, she tapped a key so fast the sound echoed in the room. The screen went blank. Caroline forced a gentle smile. "Just checking if you need anything, love." Lily's reply was almost a whisper. "I am fine." But Caroline heard the tremor in her voice, a small quiver that lingered in the air even after she left the doorway. Something was wrong. Something Lily could not, or would not, say. Later that night, when the house had gone quiet and the street lamps flickered like watchful eyes, Caroline walked past Lily's room again. The light was still on. Shadows moved beneath the door, slow and uncertain. Caroline almost knocked. Almost asked what troubled her daughter. But she stopped herself. Lily valued her privacy, and Caroline had promised long ago to trust her. She went to bed with a heavy heart. Just after midnight, a soft metallic sound pulled her awake. Caroline slipped from under the blanket and stepped into the hallway. Downstairs, faint light spilled from the living room. She followed it, each step slowing her breath. Lily was on the sofa with her laptop open again. She did not notice her mother at first. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled. Caroline opened her mouth to speak, but her words froze when she looked at the screen. Lily had typed something into the search bar. A single line that made Caroline's pulse thunder in her ears. "How to prove your mother is not your real mother." Caroline felt the world tilt. For a moment she could not breathe. She stepped forward, and Lily slammed the laptop shut with a sharp gasp. "Mum, it is nothing. Please go back to bed." Caroline tried to respond, but every word caught in her throat. A cold rush of fear spread through her chest. She had spent 16 years hiding the past. 16 years avoiding the truth she had buried beneath the routines of motherhood. She had prayed the past would never return. But Lily's frightened eyes told her that the past was already here, standing between them like a shadow that had waited patiently for its moment. That night, long after Lily returned to her bedroom, Caroline lay awake with her heart beating like a warning. Something had shaken her daughter deeply. Something that might destroy the fragile world they had built. And for the first time in years, Caroline realized she might soon face the secret she never meant to face again. Caroline woke the next morning with the weight of the night still pressing on her chest. Sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains as if even the day itself hesitated to enter the house. She moved through the kitchen in silence, making tea she barely tasted. Every sound felt amplified. The click of the kettle. The wind brushing the window. The quiet footsteps coming down the stairs. Lily entered the kitchen with her gaze fixed on the floor. She poured herself a glass of water without a word. Caroline longed to reach for her, to ask why she had searched those words, to tell her she did not need to fear anything. But something in Lily's posture told her that pushing now would only drive her further away. Breakfast passed in strained silence. Lily left for school with a quick goodbye spoken too softly, and the door closed with a finality that made Caroline flinch. For a long moment, she stood in the hallway listening to the emptiness. When she finally moved, it was not a conscious decision. Her feet simply carried her through the living room, past the sofa where Lily had sat trembling in the glow of her laptop, and towards the narrow door under the stairs. The door to the cellar. Caroline had not opened it in years. The cellar had always been a room of forgotten things. Boxes of old clothes. Scrapbooks she had never finished. Objects tied to memories she preferred not to disturb. As she pulled the string that switched on the single hanging bulb, dust floated like pale ghosts through the air. The stairs creaked beneath her as she descended. She walked slowly between stacks of cardboard boxes, scanning the labels she had written years ago. Winter jumpers. School books. Christmas lights. None of them were what she sought. She did not know what had brought her here, only that something inside her whispered that the answers would be found among the shadows of the past. Then she saw it. A small wooden chest placed beneath a shelf, half hidden behind an old suitcase. She froze. The chest. She had almost forgotten it existed. It was the one thing she had brought with her from the house she stayed in when she was 16. The place she had lived during her pregnancy. The place that held the secret she had sworn never to revisit. Her hands shook as she lifted the chest. Dust coated the lid. The metal lock was rusted but still intact. She hesitated, her breath unsteady, then opened it. Inside lay a thin bundle of letters tied with a fraying red ribbon. Caroline's heart thudded painfully as she untied the ribbon and lifted the first letter. Her name was written on the envelope in the neat handwriting she recognized immediately. It belonged to a woman called Sister Margaret, one of the caretakers at the home for young mothers. The same home that had been closed years later after a scandal involving missing birth records and unauthorized adoptions. A home where paperwork was changed, names were altered, and infants were sometimes taken without the consent of the girls who bore them. Caroline unfolded the letter. Her eyes scanned the first lines, and the words hit her like a blow. You must be prepared for the possibility that the child you are carrying may not remain in your care. There are arrangements being made. You are young, and your future cannot be built upon this alone. Caroline felt the room close around her. Her hands went cold. She read on. Not every mother will leave with the child they delivered. Sometimes decisions are made for the greater good. You will understand one day. The letter slipped from her fingers. Caroline pressed her hand against her mouth to stop the cry rising in her throat. Memories she had forced deep into silence clawed their way back. The locked doors. The hushed conversations. The moments after the birth that she could never fully remember. The blurry haze. The confusion. The fear. Had Lily been taken from her? Had she been given a child who was not hers? Had the truth been hidden from both of them all these years? Caroline sank to the cellar floor as the bulb above her flickered. She forced herself to breathe, though every breath felt thinner than the last. Upstairs, the house stood quiet. But in the dim cellar, Caroline Mercer knew one thing with absolute certainty. The secret she had buried had never died. It had simply been waiting. And now it had returned, threatening to tear apart the only thing she had ever loved completely. The days that followed moved with an unsettling stillness, as if time itself had become cautious. Caroline carried the letter with her everywhere she went. She folded it. Unfolded it. Read the words again and again until they echoed in her mind like a whispered warning. She found herself staring at Lily more than she intended, searching for signs, clues, anything that might confirm or deny her fear. Lily, for her part, drifted through the house like a shadow. She spoke little. Ate little. Her gaze was distant, guarded, as though she were preparing for something Caroline could not see. Sometimes she watched her mother with an expression that sent a shiver through Caroline's spine. Not anger. Not fear. Something closer to calculation. On Wednesday evening, rain swept across the neighborhood in heavy sheets. Wind rattled the windows, and the trees outside bent and bowed as if trying to warn the houses beneath them. Caroline stood at the kitchen sink, staring at the storm. She wondered whether this was how storms always looked or whether she was only now beginning to notice their weight. Lily had not returned from school, though she was usually home by now. Caroline had sent a message earlier. No reply. She tried again. Still nothing. Each minute stretched thin, tight as wire. By the time the clock struck 6, worry had taken firm root in her heart. Then the doorbell rang. Caroline flinched. The sound was sharp, urgent, unlike the gentle tones she was used to. She wiped her hands on a tea towel and walked towards the hallway. Through the frosted glass of the front door, she could see the outline of a tall figure standing beneath the storm. A man, broad-shouldered, unmoving. She hesitated before opening the door. Rain poured down his coat, darkening the fabric. His hair clung to his forehead. His eyes, though softened by the glass, held an intensity that pierced straight through her. Good evening, he said, though his tone held no warmth. Are you Caroline Mercer? Her breath caught. The letter seemed to burn in her pocket. Yes. Who are you? The man stepped forward slightly, the porch light revealing his face. He looked older than Caroline expected, perhaps in his 40s. There was something familiar about the shape of his jaw, the set of his eyes, though she could not place it. My name is Thomas Hale, he said slowly. I believe you know my daughter. Caroline's heart dropped. Your daughter? Lily Mercer. The world narrowed to a single ringing silence. Rain roared in the gutters, wind beat at the door, yet Caroline heard none of it. Thomas Hale's expression shifted, not unkind but determined, as if he had practiced these words many times. I need to speak with her. It is urgent. Caroline forced her voice to remain steady. Lily is not your daughter. Thomas held her gaze. She is. And I can prove it. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. It was soaked from the rain, edges curling, but the contents inside were shielded by plastic. He held it out to her. Caroline did not lift her hand. What is that? Proof, he said simply. She swallowed hard before finally taking it. The envelope was cold, slick with rainwater. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a photograph. A single image. One that turned her blood to ice. A newborn baby wrapped in a white blanket. A tag tied around the tiny wrist. The tag had a code number, not a name. Beside the infant, a clipboard rested on the bed. The name written on it was not Mercer. Thomas Hale spoke quietly. This photo was taken the day my daughter was born. The same date listed on Lily Mercer's birth certificate. Caroline stared at the image, unable to breathe. You are mistaken, she finally whispered. Thomas shook his head. I have been searching for her for 16 years. I only discovered what happened at that home recently. I know you were there too. I know they took babies from their mothers. I know records were changed. Lightning split the sky behind him. The flash illuminated his face, and in that moment Caroline saw something chilling. He did not doubt himself. Not for a moment. And then he said words that tightened every muscle in her body. Someone contacted me. Someone who knows where she is. Someone who has been watching her. Caroline felt the floor tilt under her feet. Who? Thomas's eyes darkened. A person who said Lily might be in danger if I did not come now. Caroline clutched the photograph, her pulse thundering. Lily was still not home. The storm grew louder, swallowing the house in its roar. And standing in her doorway, drenched in rain and desperation, the stranger who claimed to be her daughter's father watched Caroline with a steady certainty. Caroline realized something with terrifying clarity. Whatever secret she had buried had drawn someone else into the darkness. Someone who might already be closer to Lily than she ever imagined. Margaret lay awake long after the house had fallen silent. The dim glow from the landing lamp slipped beneath her door, but it did little to steady her nerves. Every creak of the old floorboards made her flinch. She could not shake the image of David's pale face as he had stepped away from her in the kitchen, or the chilling way he had murmured those words that did not sound like him at all. Outside, the wind swept across the garden, rattling the branches against the windowpane. She turned onto her side, pulling the duvet closer. Something was wrong in this house. Something had been wrong since the moment she had arrived, though she had been too hopeful, too eager to ignore it. Just as she felt herself drifting towards sleep, a soft tap echoed from the wall beside her bed. It was faint, almost hesitant. She held her breath, listening. The wind quietened. The house seemed to pause. Another tap followed, sharper this time, as though someone pressed knuckles against the plaster. Margaret sat up slowly. The wall in question bordered the small spare room David rarely entered. She slid off the bed, her bare feet sinking into the carpet. She pressed her palm to the wall. A third tap came. Then a muffled whisper. A whisper that sounded like a woman. Margaret stumbled back, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. She grabbed her phone, flicking on the torch, and opened her door. The landing lay still and silent. Shadows stretched across the hallway, long and distorted. She hesitated at the door of the spare room. Then she pushed it open. The room was cold. Too cold. The air felt damp, heavy, almost metallic. The curtains shifted gently, though the windows were shut. Margaret stepped inside, her breath clouding faintly. Her torchlight swept across the room. A single wardrobe. A chest of drawers. A perfectly made bed. All untouched. All still. She turned to leave. But then she saw it. On the wall behind the door, barely visible beneath the peeling wallpaper, was a dark handprint. Thin. Delicate. And unmistakably smeared, as though someone had dragged their fingers downward in desperation. Margaret's stomach twisted. A creak echoed from the landing. She spun around, shining her torch at the doorway. David stood there. But he was not looking at her. He stared past her, into the darkness of the room, his eyes wide and glassy, as though seeing something she could not. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. She should not be awake. Margaret's breath froze. She took a step back. David, who do you mean? But David did not answer her. Instead, he reached toward the wall with the handprint, his fingers trembling, his expression empty. She remembers now. Margaret grabbed his wrist before he could touch the stain. David, stop. Look at me. He blinked, as though waking from a dream. His breathing quickened. Panic filled his eyes. Margaret, he whispered, I think something is in this house with us. Before she could reply, the whisper from the wall returned. Closer. Clearer. This time, it said her name. Margaret. She froze. David pulled her back into the hallway, slamming the spare room door shut. Whatever you do, he whispered, do not open that door again tonight. But as they retreated towards the bedroom, something thudded from inside the spare room. Once. Twice. 3 times. As if someone was knocking to be let out. And Margaret knew, with absolute certainty, that sleep would not come again before morning. Morning arrived grey and heavy, as though the sky itself hesitated to cast light upon the house. Margaret descended the stairs with sluggish steps, every muscle tense from the sleepless night. David was already in the kitchen, clutching a mug of tea as if it were the only warmth left in the world. He did not look at her when she entered. "Did you hear anything after we went to bed?" Margaret asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. David shook his head slowly. "No. Or, I do not think so. I kept waking up. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like someone was standing near the bed." Margaret shivered. She poured herself some tea, though her hands trembled so badly she spilled a little on the counter. "We need to leave this house," she said. "Just for a night. A hotel in town. Anywhere." David's eyes finally lifted to hers. There was fear in them, but something else too. A tightness. A restraint. "I tried to go outside earlier," he said. "I opened the front door, but I could not make myself step over the threshold. It felt like something was pulling me back." Margaret's breath caught. "David, this is not normal. Something is wrong with you." His jaw clenched. "I know." Before she could speak again, a soft thud echoed from upstairs. Both of them froze. Another thud followed, heavier this time, like something falling onto the floor. David straightened. It came from the landing. Margaret grabbed his arm. "Please do not go up there." But David moved anyway, slowly, as though compelled. Margaret followed reluctantly, her heart pounding with each step. When they reached the landing, everything was still. The corridor stretched ahead, quiet and deceptively calm. Then Margaret noticed something. The door to the spare room was open. She was sure they had slammed it shut the night before. David stepped closer, pushing it fully open. The cold air spilled out again, sharp and unnatural. But now the room looked different. Furniture had been moved. The bed was slightly askew. A drawer hung open. And the wallpaper that had hidden the faint handprint was now peeled back entirely, revealing something behind it. A narrow seam in the wall. A door. A hidden door. Margaret's mouth fell open. This was not here before. David touched the edge of the exposed doorway, his fingers trembling. It must have been concealed. Whoever lived here before, they hid it. The seam had no handle. Only a small metal indentation, circular, rusted with age. David pressed his thumb into it. The wall gave a soft click. Margaret grabbed his wrist. "Stop. We do not know what is behind it." But the click echoed deeper, like a lock turning. The seam split slightly. Air seeped out, colder than the rest of the house. The smell was musty, old, tinged with something metallic. The hidden door creaked open by itself. Darkness yawned beyond it. A narrow staircase descended into the shadows. Margaret swallowed hard. "David, we should not go down there." But David's face had changed. His expression emptied, like the night before. His eyes darkened. "I have been here before," he whispered. Margaret's skin crawled. "What do you mean?" David took a step towards the stairs. "I do not remember when. But I know this place. I know her voice." Margaret grabbed his arm again, but he pulled free with startling force. "David, listen to me. There is something manipulating you." He looked back just long enough for her to see the conflict in his eyes. "I need to see what is down there." Then he disappeared into the darkness. Margaret hesitated on the threshold. Every instinct screamed for her to run, to flee the house entirely. But she could not leave David alone. Not now. Not with that whisper still echoing in her mind. Her name. Soft. Insistent. Calling her. With a deep breath, she stepped through the hidden doorway and began to descend. The door swung shut behind her with a dull, final thud. And the stairs grew darker with every step. Margaret's footsteps echoed softly on the narrow staircase as she descended into the darkness. The air grew colder with every step, carrying a damp, metallic scent that made her stomach twist. David's figure was a shadow ahead of her, barely visible in the weak beam of her torchlight. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a low-ceilinged room. Dust motes swirled in the narrow shafts of light, and the walls were lined with old shelving, filled with boxes and jars. Each object seemed frozen in time, left behind by someone who had vanished decades ago. Margaret shivered. The whisper from the night before had returned, soft, almost coaxing. It came from the far corner of the room. She froze, listening. The sound of movement echoed faintly, as if someone, or something, was shifting behind the stacked boxes. David knelt beside a pile of wooden crates, pulling one toward him. "Look," he whispered. Margaret moved closer. On top of the crate was a bundle of faded clothing and a small, leather-bound notebook. The notebook was fragile, the edges worn and frayed. David opened it carefully, revealing pages filled with neat, cramped handwriting. Margaret recognized the handwriting immediately. Sister Margaret's. The entries were dated, decades old, but the words were chilling. August 12th, baby taken. Mother protests. She will forget soon enough. September 3rd. Another child switched. Records falsified. The system works as designed. October 27th. They grow curious. Must be careful. Some remember too much. Must be silenced. Margaret felt her pulse race. Her fingers trembled as she reached out to touch the notebook. Every word seemed to carry a shadow, a warning of horrors buried and forgotten. This was the truth behind the letters Caroline had found. A house of secrets, where children had been taken, records altered, and mothers deceived. "David," she whispered, voice shaking, "what is this place?" He did not respond immediately. His gaze was fixed on the shelves along the wall. Then, he pointed to a small alcove at the far end. It was dark, almost hidden, the entrance barely noticeable behind stacks of crates. Margaret followed his gaze. There, in the dim light, she saw the outline of a cot, a small mattress, and a faded blanket. The sight made her stomach lurch. It was as if the room had been frozen in the moment it was abandoned. And yet, there was something else, something that did not belong. A small pair of shoes, neatly lined up at the foot of the cot. Tiny, delicate, and far too new to have been left here for decades. Margaret's breath caught. The shoes were too small to belong to anyone currently in the house, too small, yet familiar. David whispered, his voice tense, almost breaking, "They brought her here." Lily. Margaret's mind raced. The hidden room, the whispers, the long-buried letters, all pointed to something far darker than she had imagined. The child who had been switched, the one whose identity had been stolen, could still be here. And someone, or something, was still watching, still waiting. The whisper returned, soft but urgent. "Margaret." Her name again. Closer this time. Directly behind her. She spun around, torch raised, but there was nothing. Only shadows. The air seemed to tighten, pressing in on her. The whisper persisted, insistent, guiding her toward the alcove. Her pulse pounded. Margaret realized the terrible truth. The house was not just hiding its past. It was alive with it. Every secret, every stolen child, every deceitful act lingered in these walls. And it was calling her. "David," she said, her voice trembling, "we need to find her. We need to find Lily." He nodded, jaw tight. "Yes. Before it's too late." The room felt colder as they approached the cot. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist around them. Margaret's hand brushed against something under the blanket, a small bundle, warm and alive. Her heart froze. It was Lily. The whispers fell silent for a moment, replaced by a heartbeat that matched Margaret's own. And in that instant, Margaret knew that the house's secrets were far from over, and the storm of truth had only just begun. Margaret's hands shook as she lifted the bundle from the cot. Warm, fragile, unmistakably alive. Her breath came in sharp gasps. David reached out, steadying her, his own eyes wide with disbelief. "Margaret, it's her," he whispered. "It has to be." Margaret pulled back the blanket slowly. And there she was, Lily, but younger, though the resemblance was undeniable. The same fine hair, the same delicate features, the same eyes that had haunted Caroline's memories for years. But how? Questions collided in Margaret's mind. How had Lily ended up here? Why had the child been hidden in a forgotten room? And who had been watching all these years? A creaking sound drew their attention to the far wall. A panel in the shelving shifted, revealing a narrow corridor beyond. Shadows moved within. A figure stepped forward. Caroline. Her face pale, eyes wide with shock, clutching the letter from the cellar. She froze when she saw the child in Margaret's arms. "Lily," she whispered. "Yes," Margaret said, voice trembling. "She's been here. Hidden." Caroline's knees weakened. She sank to the floor beside the cot. Memories, long buried, surfaced, the night of her pregnancy, the blurred recollections of the home, the sense of being watched. And now, the evidence lay before her. David spoke cautiously, glancing between the three women. "There's more," he said. "We need to understand who did this and why. The letters, the records, they point to a system. A network. Someone has been orchestrating this for years." Suddenly, a soft whisper echoed through the hidden corridor. Clear this time. Not a voice of malice, but of warning. "You cannot trust them all." Margaret's heart skipped a beat. She spun, shining the torch into the corridor. No one was there. Only darkness. Caroline held Lily closer, rocking her gently. "All these years. I thought she was safe," she whispered. "I never imagined." "She was never far," Margaret said quietly. "But someone wanted her hidden, to protect her, or to control her." David's hand clenched. "We have to get her out. Now. Before anyone comes looking. Before the house decides it's time to take her back." The three of them moved quickly, carrying Lily up the hidden staircase. Each step felt heavier, the walls pressing closer as if the house itself resisted their escape. Finally, they emerged into the familiar hallway. Light spilled from the windows. The storm outside had calmed, but the tension in the house remained. Caroline held Lily to her chest, whispering promises she had longed to say for 16 years. "You are mine. Always mine." Margaret and David flanked her, glancing warily at the house, aware that its secrets were not yet fully revealed. Somewhere in the shadows, eyes watched. Plans moved. But for now, Lily was safe. As they stepped outside into the pale morning light, Caroline felt a wave of clarity. The letters, the hidden room, the whispers, they were all part of a story that demanded to be told. And she would tell it. Because the truth, however dark, could no longer be hidden. The morning light felt fragile, as though the house itself held its breath. Caroline, Margaret, David, and Lily stepped cautiously into the garden, each movement deliberate, alert to every sound. The house loomed behind them, silent, yet charged with a presence that made the air thick. Caroline held Lily tightly, the warmth of her child grounding her after the terror of the night. Margaret moved beside them, ever watchful, while David kept a careful eye on the rear, as if expecting the house to react. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from the shadows of the porch, a figure emerged. Tall, thin, moving with slow deliberation. Caroline froze. It was Sister Margaret. The original Sister Margaret, older now, her face lined, ice cold, but unmistakable. She stopped several steps from the group, her gaze sweeping over them as though counting, calculating. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, voice low, yet carrying an authority that made even David step back. Caroline's heart pounded. "You can't take her. She's my daughter." Sister Margaret tilted her head, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Your daughter?" "No. She belongs to the system. To what was planned long ago. And you were never meant to find out." Margaret stepped forward. "You are finished. The records, the lies, they end today. This child is safe." Sister Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Safe? Who decides what safe is? You? You cannot undo what was started decades ago." David tightened his grip on Caroline's arm. "We are not undoing. We are protecting her. And anyone who tries to interfere will answer to me." The wind picked up, rattling the branches, carrying the scent of rain. A flash of lightning split the sky, and for a moment, the house seemed to shiver, as though it understood the confrontation unfolding outside. Sister Margaret stepped closer, but did not move aggressively. There was a tension in the air, like the calm before a storm fully breaks. Then, she spoke again, softer this time. "Perhaps, it is time the past stayed buried. But you cannot know who watches still." Caroline's grip on Lily tightened. "We do not care. She is coming with us." With that, the group moved decisively toward the gate. Sister Margaret did not follow, merely watching as they crossed the garden. Each step seemed heavier, as though the house itself resisted their departure. The hidden rooms, the letters, the whispers, all of it lingered behind them. Once they reached the gate, Caroline looked back at the looming structure. Shadows shifted in the windows, fleeting, almost alive. But the storm had passed. Rain had eased into a steady drizzle, and the morning light, fragile as it was, illuminated a new beginning. Margaret, David, and Caroline walked out together, Lily safe in Caroline's arms. Every step away from the house felt like a release, a shedding of the long, suffocating secrets. The past, though dark and tangled, no longer held power over them. For Caroline, the moment was overwhelming. 16 years of fear, confusion, and unanswered questions were finally tempered by relief. She pressed Lily to her chest, whispering words that had been long delayed. "I will never let you go." Margaret and David followed, silent but steadfast. They understood that though the house remained, full of whispers and shadows, the child, and the truth, had been reclaimed. Outside, the light grew steadier. The storm had broken, and with it, the suffocating grip of secrets. The future, uncertain though it might be, was theirs to shape. And Caroline knew, for the first time in years, that safety and peace were possible, even after the darkest nights.